What is up on this Friday afternoon? We've got all 32 teams heating up in training camp. We've got a lot of exciting things to talk about, and we are back with DLF YouTube channel breaking down every single team, all 32. Today, we are heading to Pittsburgh, where no team in the NFL threw the ball more than Big Ben and the Steelers team. We're going to talk about if that's going to continue or if the addition of a sparkly new rookie starts to change that a little bit for this team. I've got some great guests, as you can see right here on the screen, and I'm going to introduce them here in just a minute, right after this. Excited to get to break down the Steelers today. A lot of things to talk about, and maybe a rookie that Mike Tomlin is asking, can he block, even though he's making some amazing catches in practice. To do so, I'll start right here to the left. If you watch this YouTube channel, you know him very well. He's @AmazHayes_Addison. Does a lot of solo YouTube videos breaking down fantasy for everybody right here on the channel, and he is a Steelers fan, so he's excited to talk about some Steelers. Addison, how are you?
Good, man. Yeah, I'm so happy to talk about like my actual team for once, right? I'm always talking about everybody else, all the amazing other fantasy players, but like this one is dedicated to my Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm very ready to go.
And down below me here, we've got Sigmund Bloom. You guys know him from footballguys.com, On the Couch, The Audible, and always breaking down every team in their team preview series that they do through the Audible that I always listen to. Always one of those things that I look forward to as a way of knowing that the season is almost here. Sig, we're here. It's almost time.
It's comforting, isn't it? I don't know how comforting I will be on my Pittsburgh Steelers. To warn everybody, I'm a Western Pennsylvania born and bred neurotic Steelers fan. So usually if you get a homer, you might think they put their thumb on the scale to make the team seem better, or they're too optimistic. I might be too pessimistic. I'm going to give you the glass half full, glass quarter full. Maybe just a little bit of glass at the bottom of the glass, a little water, just a tiny little bit of water, enough to keep you from dying of thirst. That's about what I might do in this one.
It's always interesting to see the mix, because there's always those overly optimistic fans that we have on the show, and then there's some that are just like what you said, Sig, that are a little bit more willing to be pessimistic about, the fantasy outlooks, things like that. And it's those things, that friction, that helps us kind of get to the bottom and uncover the evidence where we make our decisions for our fantasy teams. And we'll start with something we're paying attention to in Steelers camp with the camp battles. Addison's I'll toss it over to you first. What are you paying most attention to? Storylines, camp battles, anything else going on right now that you're paying attention to the Steelers?
I mean, I don't think we've really had all that much coming out of Steelers training camp outside of, how it is every single year that this is Big Ben's healthiest season and he feels the youngest he's ever felt and all that stuff. But I do think that is kind of important because, it's another year removed from basically the Tommy John surgery that he had, which can only, in my opinion, help, right, with him being able to throw the ball, get the ball to all the different weapons that he has. I feel like the Steelers offense is one of the most consistent from last year to this year, with re-signing Juju Smith-Schuster. Really, the biggest addition was Najee Harris, and then just a couple O-line pieces were moving around. But I mean, to me, I'm just trying to pay attention to make sure that Ben still has somewhat of an arm to throw to, or throw to the other wide receivers and players and stuff, which it seems like he possibly has. And it might honestly be that this is somewhat of a semi-motivated Ben Roethlisberger that we haven't really seen in a long time, because I think that he heard everything that was going on, with last year. That Cleveland Browns playoff loss might have stung him a little bit harder because he doesn't lose to the Browns. So I'm really curious to see if that is kind of momentum that can be picked up through, the preseason and into the actual NFL season.
Sig, let's talk about Big Ben, because I think the narrative is that he, the arm is not there. It's shot. He's not going to be able to stretch the field. 656 pass attempts last year is a lot. And like Addison said, coming off his surgery, there's questions about his arm. How concerned are you about him stretching the field and how it might affect the different weapons? Chase Claypool, for instance. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Very concerned. And these things are always intertwined. But let's just start here. Roethlisberger took a $5 million pay cut to come back to the Steelers. That's not trivial. You know, the Steelers were willing to say to him, either take this pay cut or we're moving on. So they just really didn't see him as essential to their plans. This wasn't an Aaron Rodgers situation. This wasn't a situation where they had to woo him back. All right. What did we see last year? Ben Roethlisberger does not like to get hit anymore. That's different than what we're used to seeing, right? We're used to guys hanging off of Roethlisberger while he's throwing amazing touchdown passes. That's not the Ben Roethlisberger we're getting anymore. Why is this even more important? Because the offensive line is the most uncertain offensive line in the league by a large margin. Okay? We're looking at, do you even consider anybody carrying over from this team a starter, an incumbent? I mean, I know there are guys that started games on the offensive line last year, but that's a little different than any sort of continuity. They have no continuity whatsoever. They've also hired a new offensive line coach, Adrian Clem, I think, and his main order of business is just toughing them up. This was a finesse line last year. This was a line that backed up and played patty cake with the players that were rushing the passer, and they weren't opening any holes for the running game. So you have now, of course, everybody remembers the most recent development here with David Castro. There was murmurs whenever Trey Turner came to visit the Steelers that it might have something to do with Castro, and sure enough, it did. Now, Turner is probably an upgrade as a run blocker from DeCastro, but this was that piece that, hey, at least DeCastro is coming back. We're going to have a new center. All early signs are that the rookie third-rounder Kendrick Green is going to get the first shot at it and look good. At the other offensive line spot, inside, we hope that Kevin Dotson, who's the closest thing there is to an incumbent starter, 4th-round pick last year, is good. At tackle, good luck. I have no idea, really. It could be Chuks Okafor. It could be Zach Banner at right tackle, Okafor at left tackle. Dan Moore, the 4th-round rookie, might do enough to start or be the swing tackle. Joe Haig is kind of a stopgap. It's a stopper in the bathtub or something like that. I don't think that you want to be playing him, but at least that gives them a firewall from being where Dallas was last year, and now you're starting street free agents. But again, Roethlisberger's game at this point depends more on a clean pocket and time to throw downfield. So you frame this as, what about the ability to throw downfield? Arm or no arm, because you can do a glass half full and say, second year off the elbow surgery, his arm will be stronger, he'll be more accustomed to it, he's in better shape, whatever. If he doesn't have time to throw downfield, it doesn't matter. And he's not going to be Roethlisberger doing these heroic battle tested, whatever. I just think that we have to adjust that this is an end of career quarterback, and putting an end of career quarterback behind a porous offensive line doesn't usually turn out well.
Very interesting perspective. Addison, looked like you want to jump in. I want to just say, like, Matt Canada taking over as the offensive coordinator, former QB coach here for the Steelers. He has said the offense is basically just going to continue to do what Big Ben wants to do. That was the most. That was the quote that I heard from him. Addison, when you hear all that and you hear what Sig said there, what do you think?
I mean, there's nothing that he said that was incorrect, for sure. I mean, this offensive line is pretty sketchy. Ben was one of the fastest quarterbacks last year in terms of, snap to actual throw. So that was a big part of their game last year. And I think one of the biggest reasons why we saw almost all of those wide receivers ADOTs being so low. And really why a lot of people want to be like, well, Juju was only like a 5 or 6 ADOT kind of guy, and his yards per reception is really low. So that's why he sucks. But, if they're going to be throwing as much as they are, and then they still have those opportunities to just kind of dink and dunk and get down the field, that offense was still pretty productive last year, and I still believe that even though that offensive line isn't that great, I think that they're going to try to put this offense and put Ben in a position to succeed with the weapons and the speed that they have around him, and adding Najee Harris as well as just another, player that can come out of the backfield in those short yardage throws and stuff like that. Should only be helpful to Ben, in my opinion. So I am concerned, and I think this is kind of where my concern for Chase Claypool comes about, because a lot of the plays that we saw him being successful with last year were those huge, deep bomb passes that we were so used to with Ben in the early 2010s with AB or Martavis Bryant. And I am kind of worried that might not be there a whole lot. They only need to connect on a couple for them to be really worth it, though, for fantasy. But that's really my biggest concern, and I do agree with Sig there, where it's just it's just time to throw, and if Ben doesn't have that time to throw, then those big fantasy plays and explosive plays aren't necessarily going to be there, even if the offense is still kind of moving and churning down the field.
Sig, dynasty owners are not as hesitant on Chase Claypool right now. On DLF's ADP, he's going off as the wide receiver 21, which feels high based on everything that we're saying right here. What do you think? Is that a little too optimistic about him, or is that just you think the career arc ultimately says like, yeah, that's an investment I want to make?
It's not too optimistic. It's not too optimistic because I understand why watching him last year gave you visions of another Mike Evans or another dominant outside receiver who really can win with his physical gifts in a way that usually we only seen college players do. And that's why I was a little skeptical when they took him in the second round and said they were going to line him up at outside receiver, because that's how he won at Notre Dame, because he's just bigger and faster than his competition. But sure enough, he was just bigger and faster than the guys he was playing against last year. Now, will the Steelers have the ability to unlock all of his value? I have no idea who's going to be quarterback for the team in 2022 and beyond. I don't see this team being in a position to move up and get a franchise quarterback. So, Steelers fans will remember the years of players like Mike Tomczak and Bubby Brister and Tommy Maddox. And are we about to go through a period like that? I mean, every day I hear Dwayne Haskins is looking pretty good, but when Mason Rudolph is your competition, that's not that difficult. So I wouldn't be going after Claypool. He might be one of those players whose talent is so overwhelming if he continues to work at this craft that everyone who invests will look smart. I'm not there, again, because I am a pessimistic Steelers fan.
Addison, your reaction to Najee Harris being drafted by the Steelers in round 1 right here on the DLF YouTube channel during the NFL draft was pretty classic. And you weren't really, you were, I guess I'd say you were hesitant to be, excited about it. Maybe this is the nicest way to say it. Has your opinion changed?
It's my opinion was that the best move for them to do in the first round? I don't think that has changed, but I'm still very on board with Najee Harris. We have to I have to look at it in the situation that like he's here now. I can't change that. And I can't go back in time and wish or make the Steelers draft someone different. But I'm very excited for what Najee Harris could bring to this offense as like a true bell cow that wasn't what we saw from James Conner the past couple of years. Maybe somebody that's not as shifty or patient, I guess, in the way that he moves like Le'Veon Bell, but like that type of a workload on a player that can handle that workload is going to be really exciting to watch. And I definitely think that he can bring an element to this offense that, in the rushing game and also in the receiving game out of the backfield that we Steelers fans haven't seen in 4 or 5 years, So I am very excited for what Najee Harris can do in this offense. I'm still hesitant on whether or not that was the best move for them at the time. But where we're at now, I am very excited for having Najee Harris and moving forward with him as our franchise running back, I guess.
Sig, do your concerns about the O-line ultimately transfer over to Najee Harris as well?
Sure. This is that argument, should the Steelers have taken Najee Harris? This is that argument of, do running backs matter? And there's not a clear answer. I mean, we're not going to just settle this or pretend that it's a binary either or kind of choice. But what's embedded in that argument is running back production just residue of good execution and play design? Or can running backs really add value to their touches? Now, we can look at guys who were skilled receivers. We can look at Barry Sanders. There are obviously running backs that can add value to their touches. Is Najee Harris one of those guys? When we're talking about first-round running backs, he's just so competent plus at everything you ask a running back to do. He is big, but I wouldn't necessarily call him a power back. You're not going to mistake him for Derrick Henry, okay? One of the things you really like to hear is that he's working so much that the team has had to tell him, like, whoa, chill out. Like, you can watch a movie, do something else than work on football just for a few minutes. It might help your mental health. So that's good. That's a good sign. And from a fantasy perspective, I think we're looking at him in redraft as a second round pick where you're weighing against Joe Mixon, Maybe if you're lucky, Antonio Gibson is there or something like that. From a dynasty perspective, I think it may cap his year-to-year ceiling, but we know the Steelers are going to completely commit to him. He's going to get as many touches as anybody this side of Christian McCaffrey. So that's something that that's going to continue because of the capital they put on him. But if they don't get the offensive line fixed, then Harris isn't going to fix what's wrong with this team.
Yeah, really good points. Addison, I'm going to toss this over to you. The Steelers it's hard to say the Steelers have a sleeper, but maybe if we just say that, who do you think could outperform their current ADP?
All of them, minus probably Najee, because I do like Najee is probably he's a fantastic second round pick in redraft and such, and I do expect him. Actually, I saw Kate from Ball Blast, who is also a major Steelers fan. She said that she made an argument that Najee Harris is a top 8 fantasy running back in 2021 on their Ball Blast podcast, which I certainly can definitely see. Not even as like an upside shot, like that could be an over-under right there is like RB8. And so sleeper wise and going to beat out ADP. I think Juju has a really great opportunity too. He was a top 10 wide receiver for fantasy last year from week 5 on, I believe, right there with Deontay Johnson as well, who was a top 8 wide receiver from that far on. And I just think that the main weapons in Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster are being undervalued because everybody has this thing that like Ben can't throw anymore. He's noodle armed. This is what we saw from Phillip Rivers last year. This is Peyton Manning that we saw in his last year. And that's not necessarily the case. And so I still think that, Deontay Johnson is going to be heavily targeted as a main wide receiver 1. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be the main wide receiver 2, working primarily out of the slot, almost exclusively out of the slot. And both of those guys are going to get, in my opinion, a pretty decent target share to make both of them, wide receiver 2s, which would mean that both of them are outproducing their ADP, Juju more than Deontay Johnson. So I like taking the shots on both those guys for sure. And Deontay was, one of the most heavily targeted wide receivers in the league last year. A lot of people don't realize that he was like up near the 150 range, which was like Diggs and Hopkins type of area for Deontay Johnson last year. So he was absolutely phenomenal. And the drops don't matter. And I think we should just be comfortable with like as many Steelers pieces as we can on our fantasy teams.
Sig, when you look at Matt Harmon's reception perception breakdown of Deontay Johnson, a lot of green in that breakdown, but people are concerned about the drops. Are you?
I mean, there's a reason to be concerned about it because if they persist, at some point the team might decide to set him or Roethlisberger might not trust him. But we saw last year through the ups and downs, they still Roethlisberger, because we're talking about quarterback wide receiver chemistry here. If we're going to drill down on this situation, there was some talk Juju Smith-Schuster was going to play more on the outside. He got a chilly reception in free agency because he was just this boring within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage slot receiver. There's no sign that that's going to actually change. And Deontay Johnson's better against press coverage. He's better against man coverage. Anyway, he should be outside. And he could be one of those players who takes that next step. And he absolutely is the player that has the best chance of greatly outperforming his ADP in a way that, next year he'll be a 2nd or a 3rd round draft pick in fantasy leagues. He'll catch 100 depending on the quarterback situation, but he'll catch 110 passes and so on. He absolutely has it within his range of outcomes to be in the top 5 in the league in catches based on what we saw last year. If he avoids any of these little nicks and bumps, that was a problem, and then avoids the drops, he can be outstanding, but absolutely it can be a mental thing. And the other thing I mentioned, just the question of who's the best sleeper on the Steelers is it's James Washington, not someone you have to draft, but James Washington is as good as or better than other teams starting wide receivers. And if an injury were to put James Washington in a role where he was getting a target share, I might argue that he could make some plays that Chase Claypool doesn't have quite the skill or polish to make yet. Washington is a very good receiver. Someone's going to get a great free agency steal next year when he becomes a free agent. And we shouldn't think of him as a typical backup receiver. He's a starter who happens to be a backup because he's on the Steelers.
The Saints wish they had James Washington in their receiver core right now, no doubt. Good question from Taylor. I'll go ahead and put in here, Addison. Biggest question fantasy-wise is, will the presence of a running game now change Juju's usage? And He was kind of an extension of that running game, an outlet to be able to get rid of the ball quickly from Ben. Do you think that changes? Do you think his usage goes way down?
Not necessarily. No, not enough. I think to where it's going to really significant or hinder Juju's fantasy upside and potential on a weekly basis. Because I mean, if you combine James Conner and Benny Snell's total stats from last year, like they both combined were a 1,200-yard rusher, and then they also had an additional, I think, 40 to 50 receptions as well, and all that stuff in the passing game. And so if Najee gets 80% of that and maybe does a little bit better, just because Benny Snell could still get a little, Anthony McFarland could get a little, but if it's primarily Najee, I don't necessarily think that moving from what we saw last year to this year, just because of the addition of Najee Harris, drastically impacts or hinders Juju Smith-Schuster as that more extension of the running game, because the running game was still kind of there. James Conner was still efficient enough last year. He had over 4 yards per carry, that he was okay. Really, Najee is just going to be a lot better in terms of efficiency, in terms of, he's going to get and touch the ball a lot, but that's just mainly because he is going to be the guy, and there's no reason whatsoever that Benny Snell needs to ever see the field, that Anthony McFarland ever needs to see the field. As long as Najee Harris is healthy, he can be out there, he can get 30 touches a game, and I don't think that really impacts Juju and Deontay Johnson. I think that Chase Claypool is the odd man out here. I've been trying to say that for a couple months now, that, because he is more of the wide receiver 3, I think that he is more of the odd man out than it is Juju or Deontay Johnson. And so I think a lot of this stuff in terms of if the targets and the pass attempts go down, I think that could impact, all 3 of them, but I think that hurts Chase Claypool the most. And like we already talked about with the offensive line and no big plays and stuff like that, I think it is much more Chase Claypool. And I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong on Juju, but that's just kind of where I'm at.
So it sounds like he would be your answer to this next question here. If someone on the team is going to bust, or we'll say just underperform their ADP, Sigmund, who do you think is that we may be overdrafting right now?
Yeah, and I think that the answer is Claypool. Just because it's aspirational to think that they're going to have a robust downfield passing game. And just to circle back on that last question, they will strive to be more run heavy. And they only had about 20 running back carries a game last year. So I think that you're going to see them and Roethlisberger and Rudolph and Dobbs together through like 656 times. So that's like a 65-35-ish split, and they don't want that. So I think that this is basically the stated purpose of a lot of this offseason was to reestablish the running game. Now, how much will that affect Juju? He already had 97 catches and 9 touchdowns. And where can you get him now? The 6th, 7th, 8th round of drafts? So he's already undervalued. So even if it takes away some of his easy 1.3, like 1 catch for 3 yards kind of touches, he'll be fine. But Claypool, I think, Aston did a great job laying out. Look, you're expecting too much if you think that this is going to be a vertical passing game based on what we know about the team.
Yeah, these next couple of questions, I think it's easy. Deontay Johnson will lead the team in targets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be Najee Harris leading the team in rushing attempts. So we haven't talked yet about the tight ends. So I just want to ask a little bit about them. Addison, starting with you. I mean, Pat Freiermuth, kind of almost a hometown guy being right there for your Steelers. And you still got Eric Ebron in front of him, but he's made some splashy plays, looked pretty good in training camp, even if Tomlin doesn't want to quite admit it yet. What's your expectations for him?
For Pat Freiermuth, I don't have a lot of year one expectations, just because I think that he comes in as primarily the backup. He might be more of the traditional inline tight end, more of a blocking ability, because that is one of the aspects of his game that he was really strong at Penn State, as well as being able to, catch the ball and do stuff after the catch and stuff. But that is much more Eric Ebron, and what we saw from Eric Ebron last year. He's definitely a guy that Ben can trust, and even if he has, his hands issues and whatnot, we saw in a handful of games last year where, Ben was just consistently looking at Eric Ebron, near the first down markers, and he was, 5 for 50, 6 for 60, and he would score a touchdown every now and then. And that's, I kind of expect similar things. Ebron is not going to be the type of guy that you're going to want to rely in and week out, but he can definitely be someone that, you can stream whenever there's a really good matchup, or maybe you invested a high draft pick in Kelsey or Darren Waller or Kyle Pitts or something like that, and it's a bye week, it's an injury, it's something else related that you can just kind of plug Eric Ebron in, and he's slightly more than touchdown dependent, because I think that he has a stable target share on a weekly basis. But that touchdown obviously is going to help you a lot, obviously, just because it's a touchdown. But he's definitely, I think, a better shot than a lot of other tight ends that you might find on your waiver wire or other late round tight ends and such that you could, potentially like a lot more. Maybe guys like, I don't know if Irv Smith versus Eric Ebron, I think would be interesting. And I was going to say Adam Troutman, but before the Michael Thomas injury, or after the Michael Thomas injury, that changed significantly. Just other tight ends kind of in that range, in the 12 to 16 or 17 range, that I think Eric Ebron could definitely be in that conversation and potentially be one of the better options for you, just on a potential stream basis in 2021.
Sig, what's your read on the tight end situation? And I mean, is Freiermuth ultimately set up to take over here? And how exciting should that be for us fantasy owners?
Not very. And yes, I answered this out of order. Look, Freiermuth is Heath Miller. Remember Heath? I mean, he's going to be another Heath Miller. They like him for his blocking as much as his receiving. He's going to be a competent receiver. Again, think Austin Hooper. Now, in the exact perfect situation, Austin Hooper was the tight end one for a little bit. This is not an exact perfect situation because of Ebron. It's funny. We should do a poll. Who's more upset to see an old tight end on the roster? The Bears fans with Jimmy Graham or the Steelers fans with Eric Ebron? Because I at least can say what Jimmy Graham can add. He can add that post-up target in the red zone to score touchdowns. What does Eric Ebron add? I don't really know, honestly. Like Aston was saying, Roethlisberger leaned on him at times, but Freiermuth has had a good open to camp. I think they're going to want him in as much as they feel comfortable with him in, and probably by the end of the season, we're going to say, why is Eric Ebron still on this team? Why did they bring him back at $6 million for the role that he's playing?
Okay, Sig, last question. I'll toss it over to you first. It's a beefed up AFC North. There's a lot of good teams there, but the Steelers are the reigning champs of the AFC North here. What do you think their record's going to be in 2021?
Yeah, and you said the most important piece of information. They're the reigning champs, okay? So they're not getting any breaks in their schedule. They're going to have to play Buffalo. They're going to have to play Kansas City. Actually, I think they're playing the whole division, but you get the point. Their extra game is Seattle. That's putting them at a disadvantage in a division that's going to be tighter than ever. I want to say 9 or 10 wins to be optimistic, but if Roethlisberger gets hurt, and come on, and I don't mean gets hurt and misses time, just if he gets hurt, because with these quarterbacks at the end of their career, they can come out in September and say, I feel like I'm 23 years old again and I'm in great shape and everything's coming easy to me. But talk to me in December. And that's what matters the most in fantasy leagues. Obviously, that's what matters in the playoff hunt too. So I'm just going to say 9 wins, knowing that the floor below that is much lower than the ceiling is higher. I mean, I think this team is going to top out at 11 wins in a best case scenario because of their limitations on offense. And by the way, we haven't mentioned this, who's going to line up at the other cornerback position? Steven Nelson is a Philadelphia Eagle now. There's still problems. I love Melvin Ingram. I'm glad they got Melvin Ingram. There's still major problems with inside linebacker depth. We saw how that went last year. So this is still a defense that has potential Achilles heels. The safety that lines up next to Minkah Fitzpatrick. Teams are good at finding the weak link. The Steelers' pass defense has more than one weak link.
Yeah, some losses on the defense. We didn't really talk about that, like you said, but that is part of the calculation when you think about this team's record. 6 says 9-8. Addison, what do you think?
The first thing that came to my mind was 8-9 as well. Although I wanted to give Mike Tomlin the benefit of the doubt to not have his first losing record season since becoming the Steelers head coach. So 9-8, I think sounds really, really good because, I mean, Sig laid it out perfectly. We're playing the best teams across the NFL. We play in Lambeau in the beginning of October, a game that I'm kind of tempted to go to, being out here in Wisconsin now. But that is the schedule, and then also not to mention we play the Ravens twice. The Cleveland Browns are a lot better. We played them twice. Are the Cincinnati Bengals? They have a really good supposedly offense now, depending on what they could do. and their true upside. We play them twice. Are we talking about a 2-4, 3-3 type of division record here? And then you include all those other games, like the Bills and the Chiefs and the Seahawks and the Packers. Like, this is a really, really rough schedule. And I think 8-9, 9-8 is probably right on the money right there for a prediction for their record in 2021, which is really, really sad because I think that this team could be a lot better, but it's just kind of realistic to expect that right now.
Well, if anybody listening to this does not currently follow Sig, the Sea Monster, Sigmund Bloom on Twitter, make sure that you are doing that and checking out the Audible and On the Couch. You always have some great guests there, Sig. Always great to listen to you pick their brains. It's a perfect show for you. It's just it fits very well. Any articles or anything special coming out that you want to plug?
Well, I'm doing my tiers right now, which is just the overview position by position and how to understand them. I know Matt Waldman. I should really just tell people to read what Matt Waldman writes. He just did something which is really a guide to the best value pick, honestly, a roadmap for your draft in each round. And there's so many different people I could go on and on about. I'm happy that I get to be part of Football Guys because it's the place I always wanted to be in the fantasy football world once I found out about it. And I'm happy to get to talk to fellas like yourselves, and sorry we missed out on the ball blast ladies, but it's every year it gets better and better to be part of this community and be part of the group of people making great content, and I'm just pleased to be part of it.
Very well said. Addison, you had a video released today. Anything you want to share about that video here?
About that video specifically? No, not really. I will say though, if you're here, if you're watching this, if you're not subscribed to the DLF YouTube channel, not even subscribing for me, but for you, Cal, for what you and Tyler do on Tuesday nights with the Ask DLF stream, all the other amazing people that help contribute to this YouTube channel, whether it's, Scott and Shane doing Manic and Chill. We got the DLF podcast coming on here as well. And, I kind of fill in the gaps on a weekly basis so we can drop content on Monday through Friday. So if you're already here and you see that subscribe button hasn't been clicked yet, just click that button and we'll be taking you through every single day for the rest of the offseason and then into the actual 2021 season.
Humble as always. Make sure you're following Addison at AmazeHaze _ because he's putting out great content, even if he won't tell you that himself. So for at DL Football, make sure you're following them, DLF. And me, I'm at Calvin Hobby. Follow me as well as we go along. And we got one more week left and we'll be all the way wrapped up with all 32 teams. We appreciate you guys being along for the journey, and we